The crystal glass exploded against the marble floor. In a dining room where billionaires whispered market secrets over $300 steaks, the sound of shattering glass was more than noise. It was a violation. Every head turned toward table 12. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. A woman in diamonds actually gasped. Cassidy Sterling, 8 years old, stood on her chair like a tiny dictator, surveying a conquered territory. Her father, a man who could move $4 billion with a single signature, sat frozen in his seat, paralyzed. His face had gone the color of old paper. The CEO across from him, Mr. Chen, dabbed water from his $12,000 suit with a napkin that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He said nothing. That silence was louder than any scream. And in the corner of the room, unnoticed by everyone except the child, stood Sloane Whitaker. She wasn't supposed to be part of this story. She was furniture, invisible, the help. But in exactly 14 seconds, she was going to do something that would make every single person in that room question everything they thought they knew about power. Have you ever watched someone being treated like they don't exist and said nothing because speaking up felt too dangerous? Drop a comment and let me know, because what's about to happen will make you rethink every moment you stayed silent. Welcome to my channel. Please do well to support by liking and subscribing, and comment where you're watching from. See you at the end of the video. God bless you. Let me tell you how we got here. 45 minutes earlier, Sloane had walked through the service entrance of the Sterling Oak with her head high and her expectations low. The club's initiation fee was $250,000. Just to walk through the door, just to sit down. The people who ate here didn't have wealth, they had gravity. They bent the world toward themselves without even trying. She'd been working there for 6 months, and in that time, she'd learned one critical truth. Rich people don't see you unless they need something. And even then, they see the thing you can do for them, not you. The dining room smelled like old money and older wood. Mahogany panels lined the walls. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high your voice got lost before it reached them. Men in suits that cost more than her rent murmured about mergers and acquisitions. Women with jewelry that could fund a small country's education budget laughed quietly into champagne flutes. Sloane moved between tables like a ghost, efficient, silent, professional. That's when Julian Vane appeared. The maitre d' was a tall man with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He moved through the room like he owned it, which he didn't, but he acted like the members were renting space in his personal kingdom. He stopped beside Sloane as she refilled a water glass. "You're furniture," he said quietly so only she could hear. "Act like it." She didn't respond. There was no point. Men like Julian Vane didn't ask questions. They issued reminders. He wanted her to know her place, and her place was nowhere. Invisible. A function, not a person. She watched him glide away, all performance and polish, and felt something cold settle in her chest. Not anger, something quieter, something older. The kind of feeling that comes from being reminded over and over that your humanity is optional. But Sloane Whitaker hadn't always been furniture. 3 years ago, she'd been working on her PhD in child psychology. She'd been good at it, too. Really good. Her focus was attachment theory, specifically how children form emotional bonds when their primary caregivers are physically present but emotionally absent. She'd been 6 months from defending her dissertation when her grandmother got sick. Not sick like a cold, sick like time running out. So Sloane put her life on pause. She moved back home. She became a caregiver, a nurse, a companion. And when the medical bills started piling up faster than insurance could cover them, she took a job at the Sterling Oak because the tips were legendary and the hours were flexible. She told herself it was temporary, just until her grandmother stabilized, just until she could breathe again. That was 2 years ago. Now she was here in a room full of people who had everything except the one thing that actually mattered, and she was supposed to pretend she didn't notice. She was supposed to keep her head down, pour the water, clear the plates, and dissolve back into the walls. But then Sterling IV walked in, She recognized him immediately. Everyone did. His face had been on the cover of Forbes 3 times. He ran a hedge fund that managed assets worth more than some countries' GDP. He could navigate a hostile corporate takeover in his sleep. He could read a balance sheet the way other people read grocery lists. But when his daughter walked in behind him, Sloane saw something nobody else seemed to notice. He was terrified. Not of losing money. Not of bad press. He was terrified of an 8-year-old girl in a white dress and patent leather shoes. Cassidy Sterling moved through the dining room like she was surveying enemy territory. Her eyes swept across the tables, calculating, measuring. She wasn't acting like a child. She was acting like someone who'd spent her entire life learning that chaos was the only language adults understood. Sterling guided her to table 12 with one hand hovering near her shoulder, never quite touching. Like she was something fragile or explosive. Maybe both. Sloane watched from across the room as they sat down. Sterling's hands were shaking slightly as he unfolded his napkin. Cassidy sat perfectly still, back straight, hands in her lap. A little statue. A performance of good behavior. But her eyes were moving, constantly. She was tracking every person in the room, every sound, every shift in attention. And then those eyes found Sloane. For just a second, their gazes locked. Sloane saw something flicker across the girl's face. Recognition, maybe. Not of Sloane specifically, but of something Sloane represented. Another person watching. Another observer in a room full of performers. Cassidy's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Then Mr. Chen arrived. He was exactly the kind of man you'd expect at a $4 billion negotiation. Impeccably dressed, unreadable expression. The kind of calm that comes from having options. He shook Sterling's hand with the grip of someone who knew he had the upper hand and didn't need to prove it. Sloane was assigned to their table. Julian Vane made the announcement with the tone of someone assigning a soldier to a minefield. Table 12. Don't screw it up. She approached with a water pitcher and 3 menus. Sterling didn't look at her. Mr. Chen nodded slightly, the way you might acknowledge a piece of furniture that was exactly where it should be. But Cassidy watched her with those calculating eyes. Good evening, Sloane said quietly. Professional, invisible. Sterling barely managed a distracted nod. He was already leaning toward Mr. Chen, launching into small talk that sounded rehearsed. Market trends, mutual acquaintances. The weather, as if men like them cared about the weather. Sloane poured the water and stepped back. That's when Cassidy spoke for the first time. This water is too cold. Her voice was flat. Not angry, not whiny. Just stating a fact. Testing. Sterling's entire body went rigid. Cassidy, sweetheart, the water's fine. It's too cold, she repeated. Louder this time, not a tantrum. A statement. Mr. Chen's expression didn't change, but Sloane noticed his eyes shift slightly. He was watching now, evaluating. I'll get you room temperature water, Sloane said calmly. She turned to leave, but Cassidy's voice stopped her. I don't want room temperature water. I want water that isn't too cold. The logic was circular. The request was impossible. That was the point. Sterling's face had gone from pale to flushed. Sweat was forming along his hairline. Cassidy, please. Not tonight. I'm just asking for water that isn't too cold, Cassidy said, and her voice had taken on an edge now. The edge of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Is that too much to ask? Other diners were starting to glance over. Nothing obvious, just quick looks. But in a place like the Sterling Oak, quick looks were spotlights. Mr. Chen picked up his menu, but Sloane could tell he wasn't reading it. He was listening, watching. This dinner wasn't just about business anymore. It was a test. Sterling was currently failing. I'll bring you different water, Sloane said again, keeping her voice steady. Cassidy's eyes locked onto hers. For a moment, something passed between them. A flicker of understanding. The girl wasn't actually upset about water. She was upset about everything the water represented. Every time someone had tried to fix her feelings with things instead of presents. Every time she'd been treated like a problem to be managed instead of a person to be known. But before Sloane could move, Cassidy picked up her glass and threw it. Not at anyone specifically, just threw it. The glass arced through the air in slow motion, water trailing behind it like a comet's tail, and then it hit the marble floor and exploded into 1,000 glittering pieces. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped, every single one. 30 people turned to stare at table 12. At the little girl standing on her chair now, chest heaving, face flushed. At the billionaire frozen in his seat like a statue. At the CEO dabbing his now soaked jacket with a napkin. At the black waitress standing perfectly still, water pitcher in hand, face calm as glass. What would you do if a child's cry for help looked like destruction? Sterling's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. No sound came out. His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles went white. He was a man who'd stared down hostile boardrooms, who'd negotiated billion-dollar deals with dictators, who'd built an empire on his ability to stay calm under pressure. But right now, facing his own daughter, he was completely, utterly powerless. Mr. Chen set down his napkin with deliberate care. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The water spreading across his custom suit said everything. This wasn't just about a ruined jacket. This was about control, about whether Sterling could manage his own life well enough to be trusted with $4 billion of someone else's investment. The answer, currently standing on a chair and breathing hard, was clearly no. Julian Vane materialized like a shark smelling blood. He crossed the dining room in 4 long strides, his face a mask of controlled fury. But he wasn't looking at Cassidy. He was looking at Sloane. "Clean this up," he hissed under his breath. "Now, and then get out of sight." Sloane didn't move. Not yet. She was watching Cassidy, who was watching her father, who was watching his entire world collapse in real time. The girl's chest was heaving, her hands were shaking, but her eyes, those calculating eyes, were bone dry. No tears. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a performance, a carefully orchestrated demonstration of the only power she had left. Around them, the other diners had returned to their conversations, but quieter now. Phones were being discreetly positioned. Someone was definitely recording. By tomorrow morning, this would be a whispered story in every elite circle in Manhattan. The hedge fund titan who couldn't control his own child. Sterling finally found his voice. "Cassidy, sit down, please." "No." Her voice was steady, clear. She wasn't yelling. That made it worse somehow. "Sweetheart, I'll get you whatever you want. A new iPad. That trip to Paris you mentioned? Anything." "I don't want an iPad," Cassidy said. "I want water that isn't too cold." It would have been funny if it wasn't so desperately sad. Mr. Chen stood up, slowly, deliberately. "Sterling, I think we should reschedule." "No, wait, please." Sterling was standing now too, one hand reaching out like he could physically hold the deal together. It's been a long day and—" "I understand," Mr. Chen said, but his tone suggested he understood far more than Sterling wanted him to. "We'll be in touch." He walked away without looking back, without shaking hands, without any of the polite rituals that cushioned these kinds of moments. He just left. $4 billion walked out the door in a $12,000 suit with water stains on the lapels. The dining room had gone from quiet to silent. The kind of silence that has weight, that has judgment built into it. Cassidy was still standing on her chair. Her face had shifted from defiance to something else. Something that looked almost like panic. Like she'd pressed a button expecting one thing and gotten something much bigger. Much scarier. Her hand reached for the plate of caviar in front of her. $3,000 worth of tiny black eggs that probably tasted like the ocean and prestige. Julian Vane saw it at the same time Sloane did. "Stop her!" he snapped. "Right now!" Sloane could have stepped forward, could have grabbed the plate, could have physically prevented what was about to happen. That's what Julian wanted. That's what the situation called for according to every unwritten rule of service industry survival. But Sloane didn't grab the plate. She knelt. Not in front of Cassidy. Not in submission to anyone in the room. She knelt beside the table, lowering herself until she was at eye level with the little girl standing on the chair. The room's collective intake of breath was almost audible. A black woman kneeling in a room full of white billionaires carried weight that had nothing to do with service and everything to do with history, with power, with every complicated, ugly truth about who was allowed to have dignity and who had to earn it over and over again. But Sloane wasn't kneeling for them. She was kneeling for Cassidy. Their eyes met. 8 years old and 28 years old. Child and adult. Powerless and supposedly powerful. But in that moment, something passed between them that had nothing to do with those categories. Sloane spoke in a whisper so quiet the nearest table couldn't hear it. So quiet Julian Vane, hovering 3 feet away, had to strain to catch the words. You aren't angry about the water. Cassidy's hand, still hovering over the caviar plate, froze. You're angry because you're the only person in this room who isn't being paid to be here. The girl's face crumpled, not into tears, into something rawer, recognition, the terrible relief of being seen. Around them, the dining room held its breath. Sterling was frozen halfway out of his chair. Julian was calculating whether to intervene. The other diners were pretending not to watch while watching everything. Sloane picked up a clean linen napkin from the table. She held it out to Cassidy. Help me fix the mistake, she said quietly. Together. It was an invitation, not an order, not a bribe, an invitation to participate in reality instead of performing for an audience that didn't actually see her. Cassidy's hand dropped away from the caviar. Slowly, like she was moving through water, she took the napkin. She climbed down from the chair. Her patent leather shoes crunched on broken glass. She knelt beside Sloane, and together they started picking up the larger pieces of crystal. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They just watched as an 8-year-old girl and a waitress cleaned up a mess together on the floor of the most exclusive dining club in Manhattan. For the first time in 3 years, Cassidy Sterling wasn't performing. She was just being present, human, real. And for the first time in maybe her entire life, someone had invited her to be exactly that. Sterling stood frozen, watching his daughter kneel on the floor with a woman whose name he probably didn't even know. His face was doing something complicated. Shame and gratitude and confusion all mixed together into an expression that looked almost like grief. Julian Vane's face was doing something simpler. Pure calculation. He was already writing the incident report in his head, already figuring out how to spin this, already deciding who would take the blame. It wouldn't be the member. It never was. How many times have you watched someone be treated like furniture and said nothing because speaking up felt too risky? The dinner service continued around them, but Table 12 had become an island. Sloane and Cassidy finished collecting the broken glass in careful silence. The girl's hands were steady now, focused. She was good at this, actually. Good at fixing things when someone gave her the space to do it. When the last piece was collected, Cassidy looked up at her father. I'm sorry, she said, but Sterling barely seemed to hear her. He was staring at Sloane with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Not angry, not grateful. Something else. Something that looked almost hungry. Thank you, he managed finally. I don't know how you did that, but thank you. Sloane stood, holding the napkin full of broken glass. She just needed someone to see her. The words hung in the air like an accusation, which they were. A quiet, professional, utterly devastating accusation. Julian appeared at her elbow. My office, now. But Sterling held up one hand. Wait, please. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. An actual physical checkbook, like he was living in 1987. I want to give you something for your discretion, for your help. He started writing. The scratch of pen on paper was obscenely loud in the quiet room. He tore off the check and held it out. Sloane didn't take it immediately. She looked at the number. $50,000. Her entire year's salary, her grandmother's medical bills, the breathing room she'd been drowning without for 2 years, right there, on a piece of paper that weighed nothing but meant everything. She looked at Sterling, at his desperate, hopeful face, at the way he was already relaxing, already assuming this problem was solved because he'd thrown money at it. Then she looked at Cassidy, who was watching this exchange with eyes that had seen this exact script play out 1,000 times before. Sloane handed the check back. "I can't accept this." Sterling blinked, like she'd spoken a foreign language. "I'm sorry." "Money is what you give people when you don't have time," Sloane said quietly. "Your daughter doesn't need your money. She has plenty of that. She needs your time. She needs you to be present, not just physically here, actually present." The words fell into the space between them like stones into still water, rippling outward, changing everything. Sterling's face went through several expressions at once. Confusion, offense, and then something that looked almost like pain, like he'd been struck and was only just now feeling it. "That's not your signature she needs on a check," Sloane continued. "That's not what any of this is about." Julian Vane's hand closed around her elbow, hard. "My office, right now." But Sterling was still staring at the check in his hand, like he'd never seen one before. Like the entire concept of money had suddenly become foreign to him. Sloane let Julian lead her away, through the dining room, past the tables full of people who were definitely not looking, but definitely seeing everything, through the kitchen where the staff went silent as they passed, down the narrow hallway to Julian's small, immaculate office. He closed the door, turned to face her. His expression was cold enough to freeze water. "You're fired." Sloane had expected it, but hearing the words still felt like a punch to the chest. "On what grounds?" "You violated member privacy by refusing a gratuity. You overstepped your professional boundaries by engaging with a member's family matters. You created a scene that reflected poorly on this establishment." He was ticking off reasons on his fingers like he was reading from a script, which he probably was. "Effective immediately. Clear out your locker and leave the premises." "I helped a child who was in distress." "You embarrassed a valued member by implying he's a bad father." "I didn't imply anything. I stated a fact." Julian's smile was thin and sharp. "The fact is, you're a waitress who forgot her place. This club doesn't employ social workers. It employs staff who understand discretion and hierarchy. You've demonstrated you're incapable of both." There it was. The real reason. Not the check. Not the scene. The fact that she'd spoken truth to power, and power didn't like being told the truth. Sloane had a choice. She could fight this. Could make a scene. Could explain to Julian exactly what he was and how much damage people like him did. Could tell him that treating human beings like furniture was exactly the kind of moral rot that created children like Cassidy, who had to set fires just to feel warm. But what would be the point? Men like Julian Vane didn't change their minds. They just got better at justifying themselves. So instead, she nodded. "I'll clear out my things." "You have 10 minutes. She walked to the staff area in a daze. Her locker was in the back corner, next to the emergency exit. How fitting. She'd been there for 2 years and nobody had ever put her name on it. Just a number. Locker 47. The other staff members watched her pack up her spare uniform, her comfortable shoes, the protein bars she kept for double shifts. Nobody said anything. Nobody met her eyes. They all knew what had happened. They all knew she'd done the right thing. But doing the right thing didn't pay their bills either. One person approached as she closed her locker for the last time. Marcus, one of the line cooks. He was in his 50s, had worked at the Sterling Oak for 15 years. He pressed something into her hand. "You were right," he whispered. "I wish I had your courage." Then he walked away before anyone could see. Sloane looked at what he'd given her. A napkin with a phone number and the words, "If you need a reference." It was something. A small kindness in a place that had forgotten kindness was possible. She walked out through the service entrance. Not the front door, never the front door. That was for people who mattered. Manhattan at night was cold and bright and completely indifferent to whether you had a job or not. Sloane stood on the sidewalk, breathing air that tasted like exhaust and someone's expensive cologne, and tried to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do now. Her phone buzzed, a text from the hospice. Her grandmother was having a good day, was asking for her. Sloane caught a bus heading north. It was crowded with people coming home from night shifts, from second jobs, from the kind of work that didn't come with checkbooks and discretion clauses. Real work, hard work. She found a seat near the back and watched the city slide past the window. Her grandmother was awake when she arrived, tiny and fragile in the hospital bed, but her eyes were clear, sharp. She'd been a social worker for 40 years before retiring. She'd spent her entire life helping people that society had decided weren't worth the trouble. "You look like you've had a day," her grandmother said. Sloane sat in the chair beside the bed. "I got fired." "What for?" "Helping a child." Her grandmother's laugh was thin but genuine. "Sounds about right. Tell me what happened." So Sloane did. The whole story. The tantrum, the kneeling, the check, the firing. Her grandmother listened without interrupting, the way she'd listened to thousands of people over decades of work. Really listened, with her whole attention. When Sloane finished, her grandmother was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret it?" she asked finally. Sloane thought about Cassidy's face when someone finally saw her, really saw her, thought about that moment of connection, of truth, of someone being invited to exist instead of perform. "No," she said, "but I keep thinking about all the other times I stayed silent. All the times I watched someone be treated like furniture and said nothing because speaking up felt too dangerous." Her grandmother reached out and took her hand. Her grip was weak but steady. "That's called being human. That's called survival. The question isn't whether you've been silent. The question is whether you'll speak next time." They sat together in the quiet room. Outside, the city kept moving. People kept working. Children kept crying for attention in the only languages they knew. The world kept turning, completely indifferent to individual acts of courage or cowardice. But Sloane felt something shifting inside her. Something that had been locked down for 2 years of being invisible, of being furniture, of pretending her humanity was optional. She'd spoken, she'd been punished, and somehow, impossibly, she didn't regret it. That had to mean something. Week 1 after the firing, Sloane worked double shifts at a diner in Queens. The tips were terrible and her feet ached constantly, but nobody there treated her like furniture. When a mother came in with a crying toddler, Sloane knelt down and made funny faces until the kid laughed. The mother almost cried with gratitude. Week 6, she saw a news article on her phone while waiting for the bus. "Hedge fund? Titan Sterling of 4. Steps back from active management to focus on family matters." The photo showed him looking older somehow. Tired but present. Real. Week 10, Marcus from the Sterling Oak found her at the diner. He sat at the counter and ordered coffee he didn't drink. "You were right to say no," he said. "I've been there 15 years and I've never seen anyone do what you did." It mattered. Week 12, the letter arrived. Plain envelope, expensive paper. Return address just said Sterling Oak, Manhattan. Sloane stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Inside was a single sentence in elegant script. "Please return to the Sterling Oak at your earliest convenience. Urgent matter requiring your immediate attention." No signature, no explanation. Just a summons back to the place that had fired her for having a conscience. She should have thrown it away, should have ignored it, should have recognized it for what it probably was, some new humiliation or legal threat. But something in those carefully chosen words made her curious. Urgent matter requiring your immediate attention wasn't the language of lawyers or revenge. It was the language of someone who needed help and didn't know how else to ask. The next day was her day off. She put on her best clothes, which weren't saying much, and took the train back into Manhattan. The Sterling Oak looked different in daylight. Smaller somehow, less intimidating. Just a building where scared people pretended they had everything figured out. She walked through the front entrance. Not the service entrance, the front door. Like she was a person who mattered. And that's when everything changed again. The lobby was eerily quiet. The usual bustle of staff preparing for evening service was absent. Instead, the space felt hollow. Waiting. And there, in the center of the marble floor, was Julian Vane. He was carrying a cardboard box. Their eyes met across 20 feet of expensive emptiness. His face was a battlefield of emotions, humiliation winning by a narrow margin. A security guard stood 3 feet behind him, hands clasped in front, expression professionally neutral. Julian's mouth twisted into something that wanted to be a sneer but came out looking more like a grimace. "This is your fault." Sloane stopped walking, didn't move closer, didn't back away, just stopped and waited. "You poisoned him against this place," Julian continued. His voice was shaking slightly. "You filled his head with your self-righteous garbage about presence and boundaries, and now look what's happened." The security guard shifted his weight, a subtle reminder that this conversation had a time limit. "I didn't poison anyone," Sloane said quietly. "I just told the truth." "The truth?" Julian laughed, but it sounded like something breaking. "The truth is that people like you don't belong in places like this. The truth is that there's an order to things, a hierarchy, and when people forget their place, everything falls apart." "No," Sloane said. "When people remember they're human, things fall apart for people who profit from dehumanization. That's different." Julian's knuckles went white on the cardboard box. For a second, she thought he might throw it. Might do something dramatic and desperate. But he just stood there. A man whose entire identity had been built on institutional power that had suddenly evaporated. "I gave 15 years to this place," he said finally. 15 years. "And in 15 years, did you ever once treat the staff like people?" The question hung in the air between them. Julian's face did something complicated, almost like he was about to answer. Almost like somewhere deep down, he knew exactly what he'd done and what it had cost. But then his expression hardened again. "I hope you're proud of yourself." "I'm not proud or ashamed," Sloane said. "I'm just done pretending that money makes cruelty acceptable." The security guard cleared his throat gently. "Sir, it's time." Julian walked past her without another word. His shoulder almost brushed hers. She could smell his cologne, something expensive and sharp. The scent of someone who'd always believed the world owed him deference. The front door closed behind him with a soft click. Sloane turned and saw what she'd missed before. Julian's nameplate, the brass rectangle that had declared his authority for 15 years, was sitting on the reception desk. Unscrewed, removed, erased. A woman Sloane didn't recognize, young and nervous, was standing behind the desk. "Miss Whitaker, they're waiting for you in the private dining room." They, not he, not Julian. Someone else was in charge now. Sloane followed the young woman through corridors that felt different somehow. The oppressive weight was gone. The silence felt less like judgment and more like possibility. The private dining room door was closed. The woman knocked twice, then opened it and stepped aside. Inside, at table 12, sat Sterling IV, and beside him, drawing something on a placemat with crayons, was Cassidy. The girl looked up first, her face transformed. She scrambled out of her chair and ran across the room, patent leather shoes clicking on marble, and threw her arms around Sloane's waist. The hug was fierce, desperate, real. Sloane's hands came up automatically, holding the child close. Cassidy was shaking slightly. Or maybe Sloane was. Hard to tell where one person ended and the other began. "You came back," Cassidy whispered into Sloane's shirt. "I came back." Sterling stood up slowly. He looked different. Thinner, maybe. Or just more present in his own body. Like he'd been living outside himself for years and had finally moved back in. His suit was still expensive, but it was wrinkled. He had circles under his eyes. He looked human. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was rougher than she remembered. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you after what happened, but I need to explain something. I owe you an explanation." Cassidy pulled back from the hug but kept holding Sloane's hand. Her grip was tight. Anchoring. "That night," Sterling began, then stopped. Started again. "That dinner with Mr. Chen, it wasn't what you thought it was." Sloane waited. She was good at waiting. "I've been fighting for custody of Cassidy for 8 months," he said. The words came out rushed, like he'd been holding them in for too long. "Her mother and I divorced 3 years ago. She remarried, moved to Singapore, decided she wanted primary custody. Said I was an unfit father. Said I prioritized work over everything. Said Cassidy needed stability, structure, consistency." He laughed, but it was hollow. "She was right about all of it. I was unfit. I did prioritize work. I'd had 14 nannies in 3 years because I kept firing them when Cassidy acted out, thinking the next one would magically fix everything. Thinking I could outsource the actual work of being a parent." Cassidy was staring at the floor. Her hand tightened in Sloane's. "The court ordered a psychological evaluation," Sterling continued. "They wanted to see if I was capable of putting my daughter's needs above my business interests. They wanted proof that I could be present, not just physically there, actually present." Understanding was starting to dawn, cold and clarifying. "Mr. Chen wasn't a CEO," Sloane said. "He's Dr. Chen, court-appointed family therapist. That dinner was my final evaluation. He was there to observe how I handled a high-pressure situation with Cassidy present. Whether I would prioritize the deal or my daughter, whether I had the emotional capacity to be the parent she needed." Sterling's hands were shaking now. "I was failing, completely. I froze, I panicked. I tried to bribe her with gifts, which is exactly what I always did. Exactly what wasn't working. Dr. Chen was literally writing notes about my incompetence when you knelt down and spoke to her." The room was so quiet Sloane could hear traffic outside, hear her own heartbeat, hear Cassidy's breathing beside her. "Your intervention," Sterling said. "The way you saw her, really saw her, the way you invited her to participate instead of performing. That was the only moment in that entire evening where anyone treated my daughter like a human being. Including me, especially me." He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. Hands trembling, he unfolded it. "This is from Dr. Chen's report. I've read it about 100 times. I can quote it. The child's behavioral escalation was a clear cry for authentic connection. The father's response was to offer material compensation, demonstrating a fundamental misunderstanding of the child's emotional needs. The only adult present who recognized and responded appropriately to the child's distress was a member of the service staff, whose intervention demonstrated more parental insight than the biological father has shown in 8 months of observation." Sterling's voice cracked on the last words. "You saved my custody case. You saved my relationship with my daughter. You did in 2 minutes what I couldn't do in 8 years." Sloane didn't know what to say. The weight of what he was telling her was immense. "After that night, after you left, I had a choice," Sterling said. "I could keep doing what I'd always done, throwing money at problems and wondering why nothing changed. Or I could actually change, actually become the parent she needed. So I took a leave of absence from the fund. I started therapy. Real therapy 3 times a week. I started spending actual time with Cassidy. Not quality time, quantity time, boring time, homework time, time where nothing special happened except we existed in the same space and I paid attention. Cassidy looked up at her father. Something passed between them, a look of cautious hope. "It's been 3 months," Sterling said. 3 months of actually being present, of learning that boundaries aren't punishment, they're structure. That saying no is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. That time can't be bought or delegated or replaced with anything else. He paused, took a breath. And 3 months of realizing something else. This place, the Sterling Oak, everything it represents, the hierarchy, the exclusivity, the idea that some people matter more than others, it's poison. It created people like me, people who think they can buy human connection, people who treat other human beings like furniture. Sloane felt something shift in the room, in the air itself. "So I bought it," Sterling said simply. "You bought what?" "The building, the club, all of it. I made them an offer they couldn't refuse, which is ironic, because I spent years being the kind of person who made those offers." "The sale finalized last week." Sloane stared at him. "Why?" "Because I didn't want to just leave it. I wanted to change it, transform it into something that actually matters, something that helps instead of harms." He looked at her directly. "I'm turning this building into a foundation for youth emotional development, a place that teaches parents what you taught me that night. That presence matters more than presence. That boundaries are love, that children need to be seen, not managed." The words were landing like physical objects, each one heavy, each one real. "And I want you to run it," Sterling said. "Executive Director of the Sterling Whitaker Foundation. Not because I'm trying to buy your forgiveness or your silence, because you have a gift for seeing people that most of us have forgotten how to access. Because you know things about child development that I'm just beginning to learn. Because my daughter trusts you, and her judgment is better than mine has ever been." Sloane's mind was racing. Her grandmother's medical bills, her abandoned PhD, the 2 years of being invisible, the moment she'd knelt beside a child and told the truth and lost everything. Except she hadn't lost everything. She'd lost a job that required her to be furniture. That was different. "I don't want your pity," she said carefully. "It's not pity, it's recognition. Of value I was too blind to see. Of expertise I was too arrogant to acknowledge." Sterling's voice was steady now. "You can say no. You have every right to say no. But I'm asking you to say yes. Not for me. For the kids like Cassidy. For the parents like me who are failing because nobody taught us how to be human with each other." Cassidy tugged on Sloane's hand. "Please stay. Please help us." The "us" broke something in Sloane's chest. Help us. Not help my dad. Not fix me. Help us. Like they were in this together. Like they were a team learning how to be family. Sloane thought about her grandmother, about the questions she'd asked. Whether you'll speak next time, whether you'll keep choosing truth over safety, whether you'll keep insisting that human dignity isn't negotiable. "My grandmother's medical care," she said. "That would need to be part of the arrangement." "Already budgeted for," Sterling said immediately. "Full coverage, best facility in the city, whatever she needs, non-negotiable. And I want Cassidy involved, not as a mascot or a prop. As an actual voice in the foundation. What she has to say about what kids need matters more than what any adult thinks." Sterling looked at his daughter. "What do you think?" Cassidy's face was serious. "I think kids need people who listen, really listen, not people who just wait for you to stop talking so they can fix things." "Then that's what we'll do," Sloane said. She was saying yes, to the foundation, to the work, to the possibility that something good could grow from the wreckage of that night. Sterling's relief was visible, physical, like he'd been holding his breath for 3 months and could finally exhale. "There's one more thing you should know," he said. "The Foundation's first program is going to be parent-child communication workshops, teaching parents how to be present, how to read emotional cues, how to respond instead of react, and the person who's going to lead those workshops is Dr. Chen. He agreed to come on as director of family programs. He said, and I'm quoting, "If a waitress can demonstrate better parenting instincts than most of my clients, maybe we're teaching the wrong people." Sloane felt tears prickling behind her eyes. Not sad tears, something else. The tears that come when you realize your small act of courage rippled further than you could have imagined. "When do I start?" she asked. "Whenever you're ready," Sterling said. "The building needs renovation. Should take about 6 months, which gives you time to finish your PhD if you want. The foundation will pay for it. Your grandmother is stable enough, right? You could go back, finish what you started. Come here with credentials that match what you already know." It was too much. Too generous. Too perfect. Sloane's instinct was to be suspicious, to look for the trap. But when she looked at Sterling's face, she didn't see manipulation. She saw a man who'd been given a second chance and was desperately trying not to waste it. "Okay," she said. "Okay." Cassidy squealed and hugged her again. Sterling smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. For the first time since she'd walked into the Sterling Oak 2 years ago, Sloane felt like she was standing in a place where her humanity wasn't optional, where she wasn't furniture, where what she knew and who she was actually mattered. It felt like coming home to a home she'd never had. 6 months later, Sloane stood in what used to be the main dining room of the Sterling Oak. The mahogany panels were still there, but the tables were gone. In their place were comfortable chairs arranged in circles, art supplies, books, toys that actually encouraged creativity instead of passive consumption. The walls were being painted, not the sophisticated neutral tones of elite dining. Bright colors, yellows and blues and greens. Colors that said this is a place for living, not performing. Cassidy was beside her, paintbrush in hand, carefully adding details to a mural they'd designed together. It showed children of all colors and sizes standing in a circle holding hands. Above them, the words, "You are seen." "Higher," Cassidy instructed. "That cloud needs to be higher." Sloane adjusted the cloud. They'd been working on this mural for 3 days. Not because it needed to take that long, because Cassidy wanted to. Because the process mattered more than the product. Because spending time together, creating something beautiful was the whole point. Sterling appeared in the doorway. He was wearing jeans, actual jeans, and a paint-stained shirt. He'd been helping with the renovation, getting his hands dirty in a way he probably never had in his entire life. "How's it going?" he asked. "Good," Cassidy said without looking away from her work. "Sloane's clouds are getting better." Sterling laughed, a real laugh, easy and unguarded. "High praise." He came and stood beside them, looking at the mural. "It's beautiful." "It's honest," Sloane corrected. "That's better than beautiful." They stood there together, 3 people who'd been brought together by crisis and were choosing to stay together through the slower, harder work of healing. Sterling wasn't a perfect father. He still forgot things. Still had moments where his instinct was to throw money at problems. But he was trying. Actually trying. Showing up. Being present even when it was uncomfortable. Last week, Cassidy had asked if she could stay with him for the whole summer instead of splitting time with her mother. Not because he'd offered anything special, just because she wanted to be with him. That had made him cry. Actual tears in front of his daughter, which 3 months ago would have been unthinkable. Progress wasn't linear. There were hard days. Days when Cassidy tested boundaries just to make sure they still held. Days when Sterling reverted to old patterns and had to consciously correct himself. Days when Sloane wondered if any of this would actually work long term. But then there were days like today. Painting clouds, working together. Building something that would help other families avoid the pain that had brought them here. Dr. Chen walked in carrying a box of supplies for the first workshop series. He set it down and came to look at the mural. "This is good. Very good. You should feel proud." "We're not done yet," Cassidy said. She was adding details to one of the children in the circle, carefully painting individual fingers. You can't be proud of something that's not finished. Smart kid, Dr. Chen said to Sloane. I know. He moved closer, lowering his voice so only Sloane could hear. I've been doing this work for 20 years. I've seen a lot of interventions, a lot of people trying to help. But what you did that night, the way you saw straight through to the heart of what was wrong and responded with such clarity, that's rare. That's the kind of instinct you can't teach. You can teach it, Sloane said. That's what we're going to do here. Maybe. Or maybe we're going to create space for people to remember what they already know but forgot. That children are people. That presence is a gift. That boundaries aren't cruelty. Sloane thought about her grandmother who'd passed away 2 months ago. Peacefully, in a good facility, with Sloane holding her hand. Her last words had been, "You spoke up. I'm proud of you." That pride mattered more than any foundation, any title, any amount of money. It was the knowledge that when the moment came, she hadn't stayed silent. She hadn't chosen safety over truth. She'd knelt beside a child and told her she was seen. Everything else had grown from that moment. Cassidy finished the hand she was painting and stepped back to examine it. There, now that part's done. She looked up at Sloane. Do you remember what you said to me that night about why I was really angry? I remember. Nobody had ever said something that true to me before. Everyone always pretended like things were fine when they weren't, or they tried to fix my feelings instead of just letting them exist. You were the first person who just told me the truth. Sterling was listening now too. He'd gone very still. You told me I was angry because I was the only person who wasn't being paid to be there? Cassidy continued. And you were right. But you know what else was true? You were the only person who actually wanted to be there with me. Not because of money. Not because of a job. Just because you saw me and decided I mattered. Sloane felt her throat tighten. You did matter. You do matter. I know that now, but I didn't know it then. Cassidy's eyes were bright, clear. That's what this place needs to do. Help kids know they matter before they have to break things to find out. 8 years old, and she understood the entire mission statement better than any adult could have articulated it. Then that's what we'll do, Sloane said. They went back to painting, adding details, making adjustments, building something together that would outlast all of them. A place where children could learn they were seen, where parents could learn to be present, where the hierarchy of human worth was flattened into something more honest. The sun was setting outside, orange light streaming through windows that used to overlook exclusive dining. Now they overlooked possibility. Sterling put down his paintbrush. I need to say something. Sloane and Cassidy both turned to look at him. I've spent my whole life building things, he said slowly. Companies, wealth, reputation. I was good at it, really good. But I built all of it on a foundation of broken priorities. I told myself I was providing for my family when really I was just hiding from the actual work of being present, of being human with the people who needed me most. He looked at Cassidy. You paid the price for that. You suffered because I was too scared to face my own emotional limitations. And I'm sorry. I'll probably spend the rest of my life being sorry for that. Cassidy walked over and took his hand. You're here now. That's what matters. The simplicity of her forgiveness was devastating. Children forgave so easily when you gave them what they actually needed. Not perfection, just presence, just consistency, just the assurance that they mattered enough for you to keep trying. Sterling knelt down, bringing himself to Cassidy's eye level, the same way Sloane had done 3 months ago. I love you, and I'm going to keep showing up, even when it's hard. Even when I don't know what I'm doing, I'm going to keep showing up. I know, Cassidy said, because that's what people who love each other do. She said it so matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Which it was. Which it should have been all along. Sloane thought about all the children who would come through these doors in the coming years. All the parents who would learn what Sterling was learning. That wealth was a poor substitute for presence. That you couldn't outsource the raising of a human soul. That boundaries weren't walls that kept people out, but walls that helped people stand. She thought about Julian Vane carrying his box out of the building, still believing that hierarchy mattered more than humanity. About all the systems and institutions built on the idea that some people were furniture and some people were real. About how fragile those systems actually were when even one person decided to tell the truth. Sloane? Cassidy's voice pulled her back. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about walls, Sloane said. About how we use them. Some people build walls to keep others out, to create divisions, to protect what they have from people they think don't deserve it. But that's not what walls are for. Not really. She pointed at the mural, at the children standing in their circle. Walls are supposed to give you something to lean against when you're tired. They're supposed to create space that's safe enough to rest in. They're supposed to hold things up, not keep things out. Boundaries, Sterling said quietly. Boundaries, Sloane confirmed. The most loving thing you can do for someone is give them a wall to lean on. Structure, consistency, the knowledge that no matter what happens, this wall isn't going anywhere. You can test it, you can push against it, but it's going to hold. Cassidy was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, is that what you did for me that night? Gave me a wall? I tried to. I showed you that your feelings were valid, but your behavior needed boundaries. That you could be angry and scared and lonely, and all those things were real and true and okay. But throwing things wasn't the answer. Being seen was the answer. Being heard was the answer. And I was, Cassidy said. For the first time in a really long time, someone actually heard me. They stood together in the fading light. 3 people who'd been strangers 3 months ago. 3 people brought together by crisis and choosing to stay together through healing. Building something that would matter. That would help. That would give other families what they'd found here, the simple, revolutionary idea that presence was more valuable than any present could ever be. Outside Manhattan kept moving. People kept working. Children kept crying for attention in whatever languages they'd learned. But here, in this room that used to be about exclusivity and hierarchy, something different was growing. A place where human dignity wasn't negotiable. Where boundaries were love. Where children learned they mattered not because of what they had, but because of who they were. Where furniture became people again. And where one woman's decision to kneel beside a child instead of cleaning up her mess had changed everything. If this story made you think about the people in your life who you might be taking for granted, or about the times you've stayed silent when someone needed you to speak, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because we're just getting started with stories that matter. Stories about what it means to be human with each other. Stories about choosing truth over comfort. Stories about the quiet courage it takes to see people when the world tells you to look away. Thank you for watching. God bless you.